what are some of the key differences between commercial real estate then and residential real estate in that regard? What else, like, I mean, that's obviously a big one is, they're commercial buildings. I mean, like commercial tenants, but what else do you see?
How much time do we have? So I always, this is the story I usually tell when somebody asks me the difference between commercial and residential. When I first got into it, this was probably my first or second year, we had a residential agent in-house as well. He left, moved to California, but we were building a $1.2 million custom home. And somebody had to go and sell it. So the developer, my boss, looked at me and said, "You've got a real estate license, go sell this." So I would go out there every Saturday and Sunday and do an open house. And people say the craziest things, man. They'll walk into the house and just go, I just can't imagine my kids growing up in a house painted this color. And I'm looking at them, I'm like, this is the most common color in America right now. It's very easy. Most people like it. What color do you want it painted? I'll paint it myself. Yeah. Like, yeah, no, it's okay. It's not for us. All right. So it's a very emotional decision.
Yeah.
It's a totally different kind of sales process. Whereas in commercial, it's very logical. Either the numbers work or they don't. And that comes down to traffic counts. That could be area median incomes. It could just be, is it a corner suite or not? And if you can check those boxes, usually you can get a deal done. So I just like operating that way more because to me, it's like, okay, I've got my criteria. I just have to find this. There's not really going to be a whole lot of emotion involved.
Yeah. So I've got a buddy who bought a strip mall down in like Florida, and it's got, I don't know, call it 30, 40 spots there. And immediately started having trouble with this thing because like tenants were moving out, and then what he didn't realize, and I didn't know this either because I'm not in that space, and is that he was telling me he has to pay for the improvements of the next tenant. How does that work? Because that's different than residential. I feel like we're not paying to, because there's no.
That's right.
Pay to fix a unit up, but we're not paying to move them in. What are you responsible for in that kind of a situation?
Yeah, so it depends on a case by case basis, but it's called a tenant improvement allowance.
Okay.
Right. So every business that's coming in, they have to make the space fit their business. Yeah. Right. Starbucks can't move into a Bongo Java, right, that's here in Nashville and just throw paint on the wall. They've got to completely retrofit it to make it fit for their criteria. And more often than not, they're going to try and put that on the landlord, which a lot of newer investors to commercial real estate look at that and they go, why would I want to pay every 5 years to just redo the space for a tenant? Well, there's a couple of reasons. One, it's a tax write-off. Yeah, you don't want to spend the money, but you do get to depreciate the asset. But two, you can bake it back into the rent. So typically what we'll do is we'll take, if it's $100,000, we'll divide that out over 5 years and amortize it at 8% interest. And so I'm actually putting it back onto the tenant, but I'm covering it on the front end. So it actually benefits me a lot more because having a higher rent significantly increases the value of my property based on a cap rate, and I get the depreciation out of it. So it seems like a bad thing, but it's actually a pretty good thing.
Yeah. So my buddy, like in this area of Florida, it's like not like a small area, but it's not super big either. But tenants would leave, and then he can't get anybody to lease it out. He's the leasing agents, like I can't find anybody. Probably because they're doing the sign thing.
That's right.
So should he just be out there doing what you said, like getting a list of who's the top 20, 30 people that would be here, and then just pounding the pavement until he gets it filled?
He's got to get the right brokerage team involved. I mean, there are a lot of bigger groups out there that are great, right? But more often than not, they've got so many listings, they can't really spend the time going out and doing a shotgun approach, right? Which is why I love boutique commercial firms in any market that we're going to look at, right? We're buying a deal in Chattanooga. I'm going to talk to all the boutique firms there. They're smaller. I know that their team takes more of the commissions home, so they're more bought in, and they're willing to go out and do that work. So it's that, and it could be, he's bought a property, right? So he could have inherited some issues that the previous owner really instituted, right? Those tenants could have left either way. He just happened to probably buy it at a wrong time. Yeah.
Is that pretty common that somebody will sell a property and then the tenants leave right away? Or is that due diligence usually figure that stuff out?
Usually figure that out in due diligence. So you'll have a rent roll and you'll go through and you'll examine all of the leases. Okay. And we'll actually use that to determine the cap rate that we're going to buy the property at, right? So if somebody's trying to sell us a property at a 6% cap rate, okay, that's fine. But every single lease better be longer than 7 years. They better be, regional or national credit tenants, or at least heavily anchored by those.
And what does that mean, real quick? Regional or national credit?
Yeah, so like a regional credit tenant would be somebody that's got locations throughout the South or Southeast, right? Yeah. So it's not a mom and pop shop. They've probably got 10, 20, 50 locations, but they're not a huge national group, right? And then you're going to look at your national credit tenants. That'd be like a Walgreens, right?
Yeah.
They've got locations all over the country. They're huge. You know that they've got really good credit. Chances are, even if they shut the store down, they're still going to have to keep paying rent.
Yeah.
And they know that.
When you say good credit also, are you referring to I know it's a term in the commercial world, but I've always wondered this. Are you referring to an actual like credit, like the way that we would in like, hey, that credit score? Or is this just a term that just means, hey, they're dependable?
No. That's a good point. And I've never thought about that because I don't come from the residential world. But no, they're two completely different things. So we typically don't even look at the credit score of our tenants.
Okay.
It's all based on financials. And that's one of the other things that I love about commercial real estate compared to residential is, I mean, I can ask for your mother's blood type if I really wanted to. I mean, we get typically 3 years of financials, a personal financial statement from anybody that owns 10% or more of the business. We can get 3 to 6 months of bank statements or more if we need them. But we can do all of the due diligence that we need to on that tenant, on that business to make sure that they are going to be the right one. And then we can actually, instead of just having the business sign on the lease, have the owners personally guarantee it. So even if the business shuts down, well, we spent all this money to build this space for you. You told us you were going to be here for 5 years. You have to keep paying rent or you have to go find another tenant.
Let's assume for a minute we're debating residential versus commercial. And say obviously there's a lot of nuances and you could say it's better in some ways and other, but why would you say commercial is better than residential? Like what's the argument for
I would say the scalability.
Okay.
Right off the bat, right? I mean, I can go out and buy a bunch of commercial buildings. You know, isn't there a limit in residential where you get to like 10 and then you have to start changing
it
up
gets
the way
kind of complicated,
right?
Yeah.
So there's that. You know, obviously multifamily is commercial, right? So I could go buy 10 units in one location.
Yeah.
And so having that ability, instead of having to drive all around town to service your 10 units for a maintenance tech, you've got one location with 10 units in it. Makes it a lot easier. Sure, yes, it's going to be more expensive, right? That's always that's great, but it's more expensive. But you can raise capital for it, you know, and you can get owner financing just like you can in residential. You can do sub-2 deals if you really wanted to in commercial real estate. It's more uncommon for sure, but you can get creative with commercial real estate too.
Yeah.
I like residential in some ways. I mean, it's a great first step. I mean, for a lot of people, I would say if you're gonna if it's between real estate and the stock market, go buy a single family home.
Yeah.
I mean, that's my opinion.
Yeah. What kind of real estate then are you buying? Are you buying multifamily? Are you buying strip malls, office buildings? Like, what do you focus on?
Yeah, we actually don't have any multifamily.
Okay.
And it's not necessarily because I don't want any. I just haven't seen the value in it for the last few years.
Sure.
I think cap rates have been so low. And if you think about what's going on in our economic cycle, it was basically a little over 10 years ago when real estate syndications became a different beast, right? Because of under the Obama administration. So now we have 506B syndications. Well, over 10 years, a lot of these apartment complexes have been renovated 3, 4, 5 times. There's nothing really else to renovate. Cap rates are super low. Interest rates are kind of high. There's no juice left to squeeze. So I would love to get a multifamily deal, but really what we're buying today, I would buy an office building if it was the right deal. And I know a lot of people think that's crazy considering the office market. We love retail, especially if it's a grocery anchored shopping center, because we know that, you know, people are typically going to a grocery store once a week, if not more. I love industrial. I mean, industrial is our bread and butter right now.
And what does that mean? What do you mean by industrial?
Like we're actually in an industrial building right now, flex space,
Yeah.
right? So industrial could be anything from, you know, a 10,000 square foot flex building with 4 tenants in it that each have a 200 square foot office and the rest of it's warehouse, all the way up to the 1 million square foot distribution centers that you see being built for Amazon. And everything kind of in between. And what I love about these flex buildings, like what we're in, I mean, you've got Goodwood next door, you've got some media companies, you've got a plumber, an electrician. It can really, like as a real estate investor, it's the best thing that you could buy because you can service the widest array of potential tenants.